Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of Reanimated. We are on episode 77. I am here, as always, with my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Good day. Hi.
And I am H.A. Conrad, of course. This episode, like all of our episodes, is sponsored by our good friends at Squarespace. Squarespace, thank you so much. They are all-in-one platform, and you can go there, use their custom tools, and make your own website. If you're a first-time user, for our listeners of Reanimated, if you throw in the offer code ZOMBIE, not case-sensitive, they'll give you 10% off your first purchase. And we really appreciate the wonderful things that Squarespace does for us. And that's all I have to say. How about you, Stuart? What do you have to say about Squarespace?
They're great.
They are fantastic. So let's chat about what we're chatting about today. We've got our lineup of zombie news as well as a review of a film that we've talked about quite a few times here, just in its lead up. It had a few delayed releases and then finally made it into a few film festivals this year before being released, basically direct to video, but that's kind of, I guess direct to Amazon and Google Play and that kind of thing. And that movie is Maggie, the Arnold Schwarzenegger zombie film, as it is lovingly referred to. Without further ado, what is up in the news items today, Stuart?
So out in the world of zombie news, we've got our weekly roundup of Fear the Walking Dead.
Non-news.
Snippets. Like, there's nothing out there. Or really, what do we all only care about? The launch date, right?
Right.
I mean, it says summer 2015, and guess what? It's more than halfway through June.
Right.
Almost. So why don't we have a launch date yet? You've got like another month and a half to just give it to us. Just give it to us, Robert Kirkman. Anyway, so I've got an Entertainment Weekly article here where the only thing we care about is that he says the sentence, there are zero woods in this season of Fear the Walking Dead. It's going to be straight up urban.
Well, which makes sense since it's based in Los Angeles.
I already went off on a tangent early in another podcast episode where I talked about all the different biomes within California that they could have highlighted.
No, it's true. There's a lot.
You come up a little bit north and you've got all kinds of trees. So they're not coming to San Francisco, which is a shame. But so no trees.
What were you thinking? Muir Woods or Sequoia National Park?
Let's just like Endor, man.
Throw them into Yosemite.
Or even further north. Yeah, but either way. So we're going to be all suburban Los Angeles and downtown Los Angeles, and that's cool too. So I'm whatever. I'm glad that there's a little bit of and that's like a big reveal from Kirkman since he's typically so closed-mouthed. So that's cool.
Right. There's another little snippet of the article, and he's talking about how in this universe, they're going to deal with the zombie infection, the idea that the walkers and everybody is infected, if you die, you come back. And the reveal on that, so, in The Walking Dead, they basically got all the scientific data about not necessarily how it works, but they got a good sense of what was going on. And from a scientist, they heard that everybody was infected. So he hinted that they're going to figure it out in a different way here, and maybe that will add a little bit more interesting detail to this this storyline. So that was kind of cool. The other thing, and he had mentioned this a couple months back, or maybe early May or something, about the fact that because clearly this is around the time that Rick is in his coma, it's going to show a lot more about how this all developed. Which means that the zombies are going to be a little fresher, so to speak. I'm sure Mr. Nicotero and team is really excited about that. So that's sort of a plus. You get to see fresher zombies or fresher walkers, I guess.
This is one of the elements I'm most excited about, is to be able to see when there's still media, to what extent they're going to be using media to portray this end of the world, or this breakdown of society and the spread of the disease, and that's
kind of cool.
it's going to be pretty. Well, I'm excited to see how they approach it. We'll have to see if it's
Well,
pretty cool now.
they teased that a little bit because of the voiceover in one of the trailers. So I'm hoping to see if I'm hoping that's not the only thing we see. So that'll be kind of cool to see how that rolls out. And then the cast list is growing, as you pointed out, and so
it's freaking huge now.
Yeah,
but,
it's a giant cast.
One of the things you will notice though is that 2/3 of the cast list is only listed for one episode.
Right.
So we can assume that there will be like a big high school or hospital scene, and then all these people will die.
Right. And that's probably not even encompassing all the zombie extras that are always part of this too. So, and then in other interesting news, the girl with all the gifts, or I don't know what they're calling it now. What are they calling this now? The film,
the girl who brings gifts, I believe.
which is kind of, I think the girl with all the gifts.
She who brings gifts.
I feel like the girl with all the gifts still rolls off the tongue a little bit better, but anyway, this article is not as interesting because of it's just an article out of the UK, from the Birmingham Mail, and Glenn Close apparently was injured on set for this film. But the more interesting thing I thought were some of the stills that we got to see related to the film, which was cool. And it's kind of nice to see that they're progressing and to know that this is coming out. So I'm excited about that. And the gallery is kind of cool. Like, it's because we came a little bit late to the book. It's kind of nice to see this being realized so quickly. So I'm enjoying that aspect of it. So I look forward to seeing this film released. And there's like a little bit of a teaser trailer showing sort of the making of, which is nice. So, my only thought, just based on some of the costuming, is that, I don't know, everybody doesn't look quite as dragged down as I would expect them to, but there's time yet, I suppose.
I don't know, man. Some of these shots, we know exactly where this kind of stuff is going on in the story. I think this is awesome.
No, I think it's very cool. So this is exciting. And also Glenn Close just looks awesome. So, and then last on our roster, and I know you're not an Evil Dead fan, generally.
Typically no.
No, but still interesting that Ash versus the Evil Dead is going to be in the Starz series lineup this fall. There's a little bit of a trailer or teaser. They're going to be unveiling, I believe, the pilot episode, or just maybe more of an extended trailer at San Diego Comic-Con. And this, does feature one of our favorite people, or one of my favorite people anyway. Bruce Campbell. And then, Lucy Lawless makes a little bit of an appearance, which also gets me excited. And of course, with these people involved, Sam Raimi is attached to this, which is great. So I know you don't like it, but I still am excited to see. And it's going to be a 10-episode series, and we shall see if this lives up to expectations. But maybe you'll actually begin to like it, Stuart.
I'm a big fan of Bruce Campbell. I just don't.
You didn't like this particular franchise.
I don't know if it's a Sam Raimi thing or if it's just that the plot and the execution of the series. But yeah, I have never enjoyed The Evil Dead or the remake that came out a couple years ago. Just not for me.
All right, but Lucy Lawless.
I do like Lucy Lawless.
She's amazing. Anyhow, but I'm excited about it. So I'll be excited enough for both of us. So that's about it. So what are we talking about today in the review, mister?
Well, Ms., we are talking about
Mademoiselle.
Maggie, the 2015 post-apocalyptic drama. Directed by Henry Hobson, young British guy. Without many other credits to his name.
Well, so what do you know too much about him?
I've looked at his website. Like, he's done some short films.
He's basically more of a designer. He did, the credits and that kind of thing and the title sequences. he seems to be much more involved in doing design related to these kinds of films as opposed to directing. It's interesting that this film got as much hype as it did, just because he doesn't, even with the short films, he doesn't really have that many credits to his name. I mean, maybe he's a total genius and everybody knows it and will know it later on, but that was interesting to me. And then the writer on this really doesn't have anything. So,
and Hobson, another thing that he's done that I did recognize, the only thing that he'd done that I recognize is that he was a creative director for 2K Games and worked on the Bureau XCOM Declassified or something, which I never played, but I know what it is. It's a game about alien invasion, and it's very stylized. So
yeah.
he had a hand in creating the look and feel of that game. And I can see, and based on the stills, at least from his other projects, you can tell that everything he does has a very methodical, it looks like, or at least a careful approach to design. And so, like you said, yeah, he's a designer, but it also comes through in the...
Oh, no, it definitely does, which, we'll get to. And then, but they lined up a very good cast for this film. Arnold Schwarzenegger, who everybody knows, Abigail Breslin from Zombieland, and Little Miss Sunshine, I think, are probably her most well-known things, or at least they're what I know her from.
Yeah, she wasn't originally the one to play that role, though.
Right.
It was Chloe Grace Moretz, who you would recognize. It's
Kick-Ass. Yeah,
Hit Girl.
And then kind of rounding out the known cast members, or the ones that I think are best known, is Jolie Richardson, which I think she's been in a ton of stuff, but I know her best from like the Nip Tuck series.
I recognize her more from Patriot, Mel Gibson movie.
Oh, really?
She's like his love interest.
That's
in that.
right. That's right.
And she's a crazy story. Like, she's Liam Neeson's sister-in-law, and she's Vanessa Redgrave's daughter.
Yep. And she and Natasha Richardson were half sisters. So yeah, they have she's from a pretty big acting family.
Yeah.
But we started hearing about this film a couple of years ago, and it was going to be released, and we thought it was going to be released last year, and it was not, and instead premiered this year at Tribeca, which unfortunately I missed. And then it had a very, very limited run in theaters here in New York, and I'm probably maybe some other markets. I don't think they really did a ton with, and it was basically one of those things where it was in and out of the theaters very quickly. So I just didn't get to see it.
And it was weird that it got bought. The distribution rights got bought by Lionsgate.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure this movie does not have, it's quote unquote independent, but with people on board like Schwarzenegger and Breslin, there's no way that it's actually getting independent treatment, right? So it gets just picked up before it even does a film festival by Lionsgate. And then they flash it at Tribeca, and then they throw it out on video on demand. Yeah. I mean, this is not, and we were talking just recently about how awesome it is that it was on video on demand, that it's probably going to bring in more money, but it's a very odd approach.
Definitely. And the budget for this, $4.5 million, it's not huge, but it's also not really tiny. So,
and the fact that there are so many producers listed.
I know.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 different producers, and at least one of them is Arnold Schwarzenegger. You have to assume that that's where that money came from.
Of course. But so I went into this, we had seen the trailers. A lot of it was Arnold Schwarzenegger burning a field and maybe some of the makeup effects and things like that. And you could get the gist of what this was about, but not really much else. So I went into this with, I would say reasonable expectations. I wasn't expecting anything massive, so I was excited to see it. And I liked what I was seeing in the trailers. I think the look of it is really beautiful, and the lighting is just desaturated and really just cool looking. Like, the set pieces, I think, were thought out, and clearly with Mr. Hobson as a designer and a creative director, I think that certainly came through in the trailers. Mm-hmm. But yeah, did you have any expectations going into this?
Oh no, not really. I guess based on the trailer, I had a feeling for the kind of pace that it ended up being. I think that wasn't a surprise.
Right. But in terms of just sort of basic plot points, it's more of it is a contagion film to some extent, or it is just generally, and it this is a little bit of a smaller story about Arnold Schwarzenegger and his family and about how they deal with one of the members of their family being infected. And not just that, but a member of the family who there's definitely some issues there. She ran away, had been out of touch. And it really had a feel of in the flesh to me. That was definitely what I kept thinking of when I was just, especially in the intro part.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get that too?
I did not actually, but mostly because, yeah, no, I didn't. But I can see where you would get that for sure.
Well, because she's been estranged. They find out, she leaves this call that's just basically telling him what's going on, that she's been infected, and he has to go to a quarantine center or whatever to pick her up, or a medical center, and it just very much had that feeling of in the flesh to me, without the impact of obviously having seen your loved one turn and come back. But I felt like the pacing overall of the film could have been a little bit better. I think a lot of it was very pretty, and they relied a lot on sort of these, I don't know, like moments where there's not really a lot of dialogue in this film. I mean, there's some, but it's more relying on showing you as opposed to telling you.
It's like Terrence Malick made a zombie movie. It's just
right.
Lots of shots of horizons and sunsets.
Right.
And occasional fox snuffing around in the underbrush.
Right. And that fox got a lot of play. That fox was a star.
Why did it need 3 different shots of the fox interspersed throughout the whole movie? It was
right.
Kind of weird.
It would have been more, to me, it's like, it would have been more interesting to see somewhat, because they talk a lot about how the crops are infected and why they're burning the fields and things like that. And because it's a small story, and I think it's deliberate in this way, that you're seeing how it affects the main characters in this, in their small family story. But it would have been, I think, more interesting, or added a little bit more depth to this to get a better sense of the outside world, rather than just little snippets, and how it was affecting overall. Because you hear it and you feel it in terms of just like tasks, like they don't have any power, so Arnold Schwarzenegger's character has to chop wood and stuff like that. So there's stuff like that going on where you're feeling it in that way, but the impact doesn't feel strong enough to me.
Well, I mean, part of it is I'm sure the budget constraints,
right?
Wherein the sheriff has to keep coming over and being like, look, we got to do something about your daughter. You aren't the only people who live in this town. But for all we know, they kind of are. Because the only other people we see are the cops and like some teenagers in one scene, which does a lot to help with the feeling of kind of like isolation, claustrophobia. Like this town, quote unquote town, we don't see it ever. Like where's downtown? Right. I don't know. They just live on a farm out in the middle of nowhere.
Right, and so even in the journey to the town, all you see is an abandoned gas station. You know what I mean? Like there is very little sort of world building there, which was probably a deliberate choice and a budget choice, as you pointed out. But
there's a weird juxtaposition between kind of the nonchalant way that the survivors are dealing with this crisis, where some of them kind of feel like it just feels like it's no big deal.
Right. Yeah.
And yet we are used to being like, oh my God, it's a zombie thing? Okay, world's over. Like, why isn't everybody freaking out and running to Atlanta or whatever, But these guys are just kind of like business as usual. Send your kid. If your kid's turning into a zombie, send him off to the quarantine. And I guess this has a lot to do with their kind of unique approach to the transmission and transformation, which is like a 6 to 8 week process.
Right.
Which is kind of the whole point of the film. So it's like Abigail Breslin or Maggie living with a fatal disease is kind of what the premise is. And so she has a month and a half to die.
Right. It's, You're right. It's definitely that. I guess what sort of surprised me just in terms of the reactions of people, even though it's a slower process. So throughout the film, you're getting hints about what happens at the like the quarantine facility. And basically it's not a fun place. You get experimented on, or there's rumors of that. It's not an easy death, like the cocktail. You get little snippets of the cocktail that they give.
How does that make any sense? This
Yeah,
cocktail?
I know. It doesn't make sense because it's sort of like, well, couldn't you figure out a way to not make it hurt? I don't know.
Yeah, like add some opium or something.
Yeah,
to it,
like there's
Jesus,
just something.
We've had this forever.
There's
just
something.
Put a sedative in it.
Yeah, there's something that's like strange about that whole premise to me, and the feeling of calm that people have even in interacting with each other. I mean, the sheriff's department is having to basically remove people, including children, and from their parents' homes. I just don't know that the people would react as calmly as they are, nor do I think that the sheriff would be, and his team would be as, I don't want to say nonchalant, and they do get worked up at some point with Maggie's family, but that's all you see about it, and the rest of it, there just seems to be a level of acceptance that I don't know could be there if people were panicking and knowing that their loved ones were being dragged away. And it also feels like if you know that the quarantine center is like that, wouldn't you find an alternative to that?
Well, the rumor that it's like this is only coming from that one kid, Trent, because his uncle works there, right? So maybe it's not as widespread knowledge.
Well, maybe, but the doctor who talks to Arnold Schwarzenegger also implies that this is not what he would want for his daughter to go through. And true. He brings up the alternative. So it feels like it's the idea that the centers are not what they, or are not the greatest places, feels like it's a little bit more widespread than that. But in any case, just even taking that away, just the thought of having your loved one, that's the last time you see them, they're not yet gone, and they're being taken away by the police. I just think people would be a little, I mean, the kid that Maggie goes to see, who's like her old boyfriend, Trent, his dad's like sitting out there with a gun, and the sheriffs have no problem going up there. Did you notice that? Like not worried about him at all? About
I think they know what the problem is.
No, I mean, they know what the problem is, but wouldn't you be a little bit worried about a parent holding a shotgun when you're
pointing it at the door? I don't know. Like, they also had no problem with Arnold Schwarzenegger's character killing 2 people the day before.
True, but
with an axe. Like, he's not an axe murderer. He's just a good citizen, Right. So I feel like there's like a fundamental shift in morality that they're also not really having to go into detail with, because who knows how long they've been dealing with this as a widespread phenomenon. I don't know. It's a very strange and different approach to telling a zombie story, and it's a different kind of approach to telling any kind of story with people, as you're pointing out. There are some weird things going on, and also, what decade is this set in? Schwarzenegger's driving a 40-year-old truck or something, and the cops are all in cars from like the 80s or 70s.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe they're in an isolated part of the U.S. where that's the deal. I mean, have you ever been out?
Like Cuba?
No, but if you ever go out to like rural, I mean, where I grew up, there's a lot of people that drive around like that. Like, they just keep recycling that stuff, and you honestly, sometimes if you go through certain areas of the U.S., it can look like that. But I think it was also a deliberate decision to keep you on your toes and questioning when this was happening. So I could see your point. Yeah,
I mean, even the cops, like their biohazard gear is old school looking, but they have they've got M16s. It's just a weird, another kind of artistic choice with film that it does keep you off balance. So what did you think of the family dynamic with Jolie? What's her name again? Carol, the woman who plays Caroline. And Wade and Maggie.
I mean, there is the weird dynamic.
She's like a second wife kind of deal.
She's a second wife. I mean, there's a little bit of teasing going on. She obviously cares about Maggie, but she's in this kind of weird position where it's pretty scary, because we've seen other families, like the family that lived next to them, Nathan and their little girl, where Wade has to basically, the Arnold Schwarzenegger character has to take them out, and, they're infected, but it still doesn't change the fact that he has to take down a 4-year-old girl, or what looks like a 4-year-old girl. And they have taken precautions. They sent away the younger siblings for risk of infection. But it's interesting because they did this, but Wade and Caroline don't seem to be taking a lot of precautions around Maggie. There's parts of this movie where her blood's all over the place, her infected blood, in their food and all this other stuff. And I know that they are pretty clear about the fact that the transmission has to be like a bite. But even so, if it's a virus or whatever, one would think that they would have some more precautions that they were taking. So Caroline says different things, like she's worried about Wade getting infected, or her, about Maggie in general, especially when Maggie starts getting further into the infection and starts smelling her like food, which you could imagine would cause some issue. But
that's terrifying. And I can't, during that scene as an audience member, I'm just like, how do you not know what just happened in this scene? You're all up close to her.
Right.
And she's like, do you smell that? I'd be like, oh my God, I'm getting all the way on the other side of the room. Because she's obviously not lost it, but she's having a reaction.
Well, and you have been following the progression of this virus. Yeah. It's one of the things.
I feel like you and me, we're new to this world, but Caroline's character has been in it for however long this has been going on. So
right.
She knows, and oh God, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
There are a couple moments in this film where I'm like, but for the most part, it's not that kind of film.
Right. But there's also moments like that where it happens. Even though she goes downstairs to make sure nothing's cooking on the stove that Maggie smelled and then has the realization, I think some of it's just denial, because it's this person that you've known, you've raised her, and you don't want it to be true. I think there's a bit of a denial going on there, too.
Could be. Yeah.
And, she's just in a really crappy position, and I don't think Wade even blames her for leaving, but he just has to stay with Maggie because he feels like it's his duty. He's her dad. And then there's the whole dynamic with Maggie's mother dying, and they talk a lot about that, and that's a bond. But I think what would have been what could have made this a little bit more interesting, because they refer to that and they refer to her mother, but they don't really get too much into why Maggie had run away.
No, yeah.
Which is sort of like that created. There's a level of trust with them that I don't know that would be there at this point, or maybe they have an option or opportunity to discuss it and make things right, but they don't really do that, which I thought was a weird choice. But I don't know. I did like how pretty this film was, and I liked aspects of this film. It was nice seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger in this role, although I felt like a lot could have been helped with a more interesting script. So they said, because to me it felt like they did so much to try to set up the look and the feel of this film, but just didn't have a ton to back it up. And to make it more interesting and a different take. It didn't take me in any new direction.
Yeah, they wanted the scenery to carry more of it than it really could.
Right.
Because I don't think Hobson is Terrence Malick. I don't think
you're correct.
He doesn't quite have the same vision. I mean, have you ever seen the Terrence Malick film he did about itinerant field laborers in the 70s?
Yeah, and they're great.
I forget what it was called, but it was amazing. And it's basically the same kind of shots. It's like lots of fields and lots of sunsets, but and probably less, about the same amount of dialogue, but amazing. Not everybody can do that. And I don't know that they managed it. I mean, maybe it's just like budget and equipment, and they couldn't do it. But yeah, so this movie got 51% on Rotten Tomatoes. And most of the favorable reviews are all raving about Schwarzenegger's performance, and some of the bad reviews are also like, why isn't he punching anything?
Yeah.
But I feel like this is kind of a natural place for him to have. Certainly, at this point in his career, he's probably pushing 70. Mm-hmm. I'm not even sure, but I feel like he's been 60 for a long time. So yeah.
I like the beard a lot, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That was a nice touch.
His hair is pretty obviously dyed.
Mm-hmm.
But he has a couple of physical moments in the cops respect and kind of fear him. So he's still a powerful guy, even though he's not actively, being Schwarzenegger on stuff. He kills a walker. He kills 3 walkers in this film. Like most people, I don't think have that kind of tally.
And he kills them, and he just kind of keeps going on. Do you know what I mean?
It's not a big deal to his character.
And he's very much the protective father, so you get that. You get why the relationship between him and Maggie is really nice, and there's some nice moments between them. I thought some of the more powerful moments that I really enjoyed in the film was at the doctor's office where they go to see the family physician.
Yeah.
And that whole reveal where the doctor's being very optimistic and not necessarily he's being optimistic in front of Maggie and then later has a separate truthful conversation with Wade. And I thought that was probably one of the best scenes in the film, or best sequences in the film, because it just showed, okay, there's a little bit of theater going on here for the benefit of Maggie, so as not to freak her out. But then the doctor has to have this real conversation. And keep in mind, the doctor's known Maggie all of her life. Maggie is best friends with his daughter. Mm-hmm. There's like a caring that goes on here. And I liked how those scenes played out. And to me, there was a lot of information that came through to us in those scenes. But I don't know. I thought that this had a lot of promise, and it disappointed me a little bit that they didn't take it one step further. I wasn't bothered by the non-physicality, though, of Arnold.
No, and I'm not trying to suggest that I was either. It was just that, the reviews were like, oh, this is amazing. But I know I've harped on this film a lot, but the film he did, Sabotage, where it is an action film, but he basically plays like the leader of a gang of cops, of like kind of crooked cops. But a lot of what his role is in that film is kind of it's paternal, and so I could see even in that role that he had the bones for what he was doing in this,
or even Commando. I mean,
he is very paternal to Alyssa Milano in that film.
I know,
it's true. Best
he carries around on his bicep. It's great,
and he chops a lot of wood in that film too, or at least he does for about a scene. So it's actually that's just that might be Maggie but back before. Yeah.
Right. Just a continuation.
Okay. So the scene where all the kids go out like all night and hang out by that school bus. Mm-hmm. I guess now that you've mentioned it, this is where I can see the most in the flesh, because this is where they're like having real talk about the effects of the infected on society, right?
Right.
And for some reason, and maybe this will paint me as insensitive, but the one kid who's like, I think they're opening school too early. We still have like a problem with infected people. No offense, you guys, all over the place. And he gets labeled an asshole for saying it that way. And I'm like, no, I kind of agree with him.
I kind of agree with him too. And I was like, oh, poor kid. He's this logical person. In this.
He's the one. Well, I mean, is it logical or is it like insensitive to say that all these people who have 30 to 45 days left of useful consciousness should be more closely controlled or something?
Right.
And there's never really a realization on the part of Trent or Maggie, the two infected people that we know, Trent only briefly, that they should Trent at least locks himself in his room once he realizes things are going badly. Mm-hmm. They never take things into their own hands, until the very end. Spoiler alert. Maggie eventually does, but not soon enough and not the right way.
That was actually what I was thinking during the scene with Trent. So basically Trent starts smelling his data's food and decides, okay, I have to lock myself in my room. And then the cops come to take him away to quarantine. And there's this moment in there where I'm like, why wouldn't he I thought to myself, and I didn't know what the ending of this was. I'm like, why doesn't he just jump out the window and off himself, or why hasn't he figured out? And I mean, maybe it happened very suddenly that he realized the symptoms came on and he couldn't figure out an exit plan. But I feel like taking in these scenarios, taking action yourself would probably be preferable, especially given what Trent thinks he knows about the quarantine center. Yeah. Maybe taking things in your own hands would be a better option.
That's what the neighborhood doctor is suggesting to, at least to Wade, and I assume to other parents too. Like, just use the shotgun. And everybody seems to have one.
Right, and then so Trent's uncle is one of the sheriffs. And
he's the doctor at the quarantine.
Oh, his uncle is?
Yeah, no, that's how he knows why.
Oh, okay. I guess I misunderstood it. I thought it was one of the sheriffs when you said the uncle would take care of it. Okay, never mind. Sorry. Misunderstanding on my part. But I also think the sheriffs, seeing all these things that they are having to see and to take people away to quarantine and whatever, you would think they would also be advising people, especially with the nonchalant manner in which they were dealing with Wade when Wade had to take out Nathan and his daughter. You would think they'd also be kind of helping advise parents so that they don't have to be put into these awful situations, but maybe that's against their ethics. It just feels like even they are reluctantly performing their duties because they know everybody in town. So it's, and that's the thing. Like, I feel like a little bit more could have been explored with that. They do know everybody in town. So therefore, when they go to confront Wade about Maggie's declining condition, they're freaking out a little bit, but then they give him the leeway to take care of it himself, basically.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot more of that would have been going on, and that's an interesting thing to explore. Like, yes, we are supposed to be doing this to safeguard the community, but we also have known all you people all your lives, so we're going to give you a little bit of help to manage this yourself in the way that you think is possible. Like, essentially letting somebody die at home as opposed to in these places. So, I don't know. It felt like they didn't. We've already
seen this backfire, like, in this community when this happened without the police.
Right, where Bonnie just went rogue and didn't tell anybody. So,
like, why would they still be cool with this as a method, you know?
I don't know. But in any case, it's just, he could have taken it a step further. But overall, I mean, I thought it was cool to see certain parts of this. I thought the makeup was pretty good.
Makeup was fantastic, yeah.
Especially in the later stages of the infection. It was pretty disgusting. Maggie has a bite wound on her throughout this, which it looks more and more disgusting, and it's like totally gross but believable if you think that's the point of the infection. So everything is kind of going from there out.
Her eye, the contacts they use on her, which get progressively worse and sometimes get better.
Right.
Like there's one scene where her eyes are both really milky white, and then like 15 minutes later or 5 minutes later, her eyes are kind of normal looking.
Right. So
I don't know what was going on there.
It flips back and forth a little bit, but then the makeup on the face when everything's, and there's little hints of it too. They don't overdo it. When she's at the doctor's office, he's asking her to breathe and you can see the infection like on her back, but it's just like a little peak. So they do a good job, I think, at doing the reveal in terms of the effects of what's happening with the infected. But, and especially the end effects when Maggie's at her worst, she looks awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Her finger kind of looks like a sausage. That I don't think worked quite as well.
I don't think that worked well either.
But, can't win them all. Otherwise, all the effects were fantastic. And so what did you think of the final scene? Because I'm not a huge fan of it for the reasons we've already talked about. Like, I feel like they waited an absurd long amount of time.
Right.
Like Maggie herself, her father, Caroline was the only one in that house who had any sense and got the hell out of there.
And they did, they played it out, I think, the way they did to have some kind of, there is, and spoiler alert, there's this last sort of goodbye scene where I thought it was going to end a little differently. I thought Arnold was going to get a nice little bite out of his scalp there, where Maggie's, like, she is literally smelling him. And she's at the last part of the infection where she's going to not be herself anymore. And she's actually been going in and out of that. So, but it's really actually a long kiss goodbye. And we just see this sort of vision of her with her mom as a young kid. And then it fades to white. because she's jumping off the roof. And I was not pleased with the ending because of what you just pointed out. I
just the illogical element of it, or what part
no.
of it?
Well, the fact is, I don't really believe that if she was at the stage of the infection that she was at, that Arnold Schwarzenegger would ever be sleeping.
He wasn't, though, or at least because his hand tightens on the gun. I assumed that meant he was awake and waiting for her to bite him in a way.
Maybe.
There's a cutaway shot of his
There
hand.
is,
going
and then I
white
guess
knuckle
he
almost.
cries. He does cry, so maybe he is awake.
So, like, what is that? What are we supposed to take away
is he
there?
Is he gonna do? Was he planning to do what Nathan did? Is that what we're supposed to get from that? That he's gonna take himself down with her, and that's why he stayed. But then after she leaves him, he's clearly resolved to take care of it because he looks at the shell, picks it up, and he's gonna go after her.
Is that what it's saying, or is he saying, "Oh my God, my gun wasn't even loaded in the first place"? Like he never had any intention of trying to kill her.
I don't know.
It's like there's a few
They leave it.
unanswered
They leave it a
elements
little
here.
bit open, I suppose.
But yeah, so tough. It's a tough ending.
I do-
not just because of the creative choices, but because we're not even really sure what those choices were.
Right. I do like the idea that Maggie has taken her fate into her own hands, and I do like that for the same reason that I was confused why Trent hadn't. But it would have been nice to see a little bit more of that. They left it very fluffy and kind of open and clearly unclear, to me anyway. So I think it could have done with a little bit more, some more of a cohesive ending there. And I guess, with the flashbacks that she's been having really horribly negative flashbacks about the zombie that bit her, the infected that bit her. So I think you're supposed to draw a conclusion. At least she's going off into the sunset with a happy thought. But yeah, it was not a satisfying ending for me.
Yeah, tough one. So overall, where'd you land on this? Did you like it or did you not like it?
I liked aspects of it. I mean, it's $7 on Amazon or whatever to rent, or and I enjoyed watching it. I enjoyed seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger like this. I always like seeing independent films, or I guess if we can call this that. It's not really, I guess, but it's not the worst film I've seen. I don't know that I would be telling people to run out and watch it, but if you like these kinds of things, I would say if you liked In the Flesh, you're probably going to like this, but it's not as well done as In the Flesh. So I'm giving it kind of a mediocre rating, but I wouldn't give it I wouldn't say like I hated it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I enjoyed it too. I was very aware of how slow and quiet, drawn out it was, but I still managed to enjoy it. So probably testament to the cast and the direction, which I did like, even though it was very, very, very slow. But I have to wonder like how long the script even was, because as we've both pointed out, not as much dialogue as there is movie. So were there just like pages and pages of scene descriptions?
You know what I was thinking as I was watching it is that it could almost be like, one of the sort of novella video games, which makes sense given Hobson's background.
Mm-hmm.
Where you're kind of putting a person through the traces, like, are you going to kill your daughter or not, or giving them different points throughout the story, like a choose your own adventure kind of thing. The script could have been a little meatier, truly, but overall, I wouldn't recommend it as a standalone film, but if you like this kind of film, go for it. That's my final endorsement.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, go for it. 2 thumbs kind of sort of halfway up.
In the meh range.
The meh to, it's okay.
Yeah.
So there we go. Ringing endorsements from Reanimated as always. We didn't hate it. Didn't suck.
So that's what we have to say about Maggie. Let us know what you think. If you would like to get in touch with us, send us a tweet at reanimatedpcast. That's our Twitter handle. Or you can reach out to us on our main site, which is reanimatedpodcast.com.
Thanks for talking about Maggie with me, HA. Fun as always.
Indeed. So until next time, ciao.
Adios.